You know, one of the biggest pains in life is failure. And there's a pain that's worse than that. And the pain that's worse than failure is wasting that failure and repeating it over and over and over and over again. The best thing to do with failure is to learn from it. Failure is a learning tool. Failure is not something that condemns you. It's not something that makes you feel guilty. It's a learning tool, like a math book, like an English book, like a history book, like the Bible. Failure is a tool that if we use it right and understand it right, we can learn a lot about ourselves, we can learn a lot about God, and we can also learn not to repeat those mistakes any longer. A man was passed over for a promotion in the company that he was working for, and he was very irate because he didn't get the promotion. So he went to see his boss and he demanded an explanation. And he asked the boss how he could ignore his qualifications and pass him by on that promotion. And you know what his boss said to him? Because the man said, "I've been working for you for 25 years. I have 25 years experience in this company. How could you pass me by?" And the boss looked him right in the eye and he said, "You don't have 25 years experience. You have 1 year experience 25 times." Which means that he never learned. He came to a place in his job and he was status quo. And he never went beyond. And he never learned and he never grew. And he never gained wisdom from the mistakes that he made. You know, there's a lesson in that for all of us as well. Don't settle for a status quo place in your life. It might be very comfortable. It might be very easy. Don't settle for that. There's further to go. There's more to accomplish. You know, life is about growth. Anything that's healthy grows. And you want to grow. You don't want to just grow in a physical sense. You want to grow in an intellectual sense. You want to grow in a spiritual sense. So that means the mistakes that we make, they're not to condemn us, but they're to teach us how we can grow from those things, not repeat them, and continue to do better. In Joseph, we're going to see a man that did overcome his mistakes. He made a lot of mistakes in the beginning, but we're going to see a guy that learned from his mistakes. And that's the best thing to do with a mistake. Learn from it. We find in Joseph a man that I call a no-excuse guy. He's a no-excuse guy. Joseph didn't make excuses for the circumstances that he found himself in. If you're living a life of excuses, you're never going to go any further than where you are. You'll be like the guy with 1 year experience 25 times. Excuses leave you where you are. Well, I didn't do this because. Well, I didn't go there because. Well, I didn't learn this because. Those things never promote us. They never graduate us. Excuses, you know what? Failure is more of your friend than excuses. Excuses do nothing. Failure can teach you. You can learn. But excuses, we learn nothing from our excuses. So here's something you may not have considered. The greatest lessons in life do not come with ease, they come with pain. Life has lessons every single week, every single day, maybe every hour. Life is meant to be learned. Sometimes we think, oh, life is meant to be lived. Well, life is meant to be learned. Life is an opportunity to learn. In that learning, we live. But without learning, we don't have much of a life at all. You're not really living if you're not learning. And that's what I want us to to understand today. We met with the staff this morning for prayer, all the volunteers, and we said, let's purpose this week to learn something from something that happens. Maybe it's an event, maybe it's a conflict, maybe it's a report, and it could be good or bad, but let's say, God, okay, this thing that happened, show me something in it. What can I learn in this thing? And if you can make a habit of learning from the things that happen, you're going to be an awesome person. You're going to be incredible because you're going to grow and you're going to change and you're going to mature and you're going to become what God would want you to become, just like His Son. If you fail to realize that life is for learning, you'll be consumed with the pain of failure. You'll be consumed with that instead of how to better yourself. Now, this principle is not original with me. As a matter of fact, the Apostle James, he said that you can have joy in your trials, not because of the trials, but because through them, your faith can grow and it'll produce patience, and that patience will make you complete and you will lack nothing. So what is James saying? Maybe he's thinking of the life of Joseph. And we're going to see in the next few weeks all the things that Joseph went through, but he learned every time. And James is saying, there's things that come into our lives, and man, we don't like them. They hurt. We don't like them. But if we let faith and patience have its way, it's going to better us. And you know what? You'll be someone that doesn't lack anything. And he's not talking about the material. He's talking about something much better. The spiritual, the emotional, the intellectual, those aspects of life. This is called walking by faith. That's what it means to walk by faith. Patience means I can trust that God is in control when life seems to be out of control. We might walk away from Him at times, but He never walks away from us. That God is always interested in our lives. Always. He's always interested in what's happening to us. Okay? When you walk by faith, it's what you do. See, walk by faith is the way the Christian lives. And what does it mean to walk by faith? I'm trusting God. I'm trusting God that when things are out of my control, they're still in His control. I'm trusting God that the things that are happening to me, that the mistakes that I make are not the end of the road, that I'm going to continue to walk with God and I'm going to learn from those things. I'm going to continue to lean on God. I'm going to put my faith in Him, and I know when it's all said and done, all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. It's always going to come out good in the end, good according to the will of God. Now, the demise of a person begins very small. When someone is on the slippery slope, it starts off very small, and then it increases rapidly, like going down a hill. You start off slow, and then as you go, you go faster and faster and faster and faster. You crash and burn. What we have to do is recognize in the early stages that we're beginning to go down that slippery slope. We're getting away from God. Genesis chapter 37. Let's pick it up. The life of Joseph in verse 1. I'm going to use today the Contemporary English Version translation. It just reads a little easier. In verse 1 it tells us that Jacob lived in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived, his father Isaac had lived. And this is the story of his family. When Jacob's son Joseph was 17 years old, he took care of the sheep with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. And he was always telling his father all sorts of bad things about his brothers. Ever have a little brother like that? They rat on you all the time. Joseph was like a little spy for his father. He was always ratting out his brothers. And Jacob, Joseph's father, you know where the problem began? It began when he ignored the biblical mandate for marriage. One man, one woman, and what he did, he took two wives. And it resulted in a family where one wife, Leah, she had two sons. The second wife at the same time, Rachel, she had two sons. Then he had some concubines, girlfriends, and they had sons. Joseph was the son of Rachel, and he was the favorite to her and to Jacob. He was their favorite. I'll tell you what, wherever there's a favorite child in a family, man, there's going to be trouble. There's going to be trouble. And it created great friction among the other brothers. They knew it. They knew, hey, why does Joseph get all the attention? Why does Joseph get pampered? What about us? And there was friction between Joseph and all the others. But you know the name Jacob? It means deceiver, conniver, and he certainly lived up to his name. He did bad things throughout his life. He cheated his brother Esau out of his birthright for a pot of stew. His brother came back hunting and he didn't catch anything and he was hungry. And Jacob was a good cook. And Esau said, man, that stew looks good. And Jacob said, want some? He said, yeah. He said, give me your birthright and I'll give you the stew. The birthright was the privilege of the oldest son to gain the inheritance, the double inheritance of the father. Esau said, you can have it. I'm hungry now. Esau stands for the guy that wants satisfaction now, and he's willing to risk his future. Man, a lot of people do that. Don't do that. Don't risk your future for satisfaction today. Esau manipulated his father Abraham and giving him the double portion of his inheritance, and his mother helped. Then he entered into polygamy. So every once in a while in his life, he was a conniver, a con artist, a deceiver. And that created a real bad family relationship. And the family had become very dysfunctional, and it was a divided family. You see, God knows what he's doing when he says, one man for one woman, and the two shall become one, and what God has joined together, let no one separate. God knows what works. And you have to work hard to maintain that biblical mandate. And sometimes people think, it's impossible. Well, it might be harder than you think, but it doesn't have to be impossible. So you work hard at the mandate that God has given. So in verse 2, Joseph was always telling his father all sorts of bad things about his brothers. Like I said, looks like he's his father's little spy. Verse 3, Jacob loved Joseph more than he did any of his other sons, because Joseph was born after Jacob was very old, and Jacob had given Joseph a fancy coat. Joseph was the baby. He was born much, much later in life. And you know the story of the coat of many colors, that it was a beautiful coat that he had made for him. And it made his son stand out more than all the rest. You know, it's like having 3 kids, but you only go to one kid's ball games. You only go to one kid's school activities. You only go to one kid's concert. And the other 2, you ignore them all the time. What's that going to do in a family? That's going to create some really bad feelings. And that's what Jacob did. He singled out Joseph. It seemed only natural that his brothers would hate him the way that he did. Now, so far, none of this is Joseph's doing. But he was the favorite son. His brothers hated him, and they would not be friendly to him. They wouldn't play with him. They wouldn't call him to hang out with them, to do things with them, because they actually hated him. You know, it's not easy to manage a blended family. We have a lot of blended families today, and I know it's not easy. This is why it takes a lot of thought and a lot of work to do so. I actually have a CD in the Media Center on the blended family. And if that's something that you might be struggling with, or maybe you know someone that is, go and pick it up. It'll teach you how to blend families and children together that have different biological parents. You know, a man comes into a marriage with kids, a woman comes into a marriage with her kids, and it's hard to blend them together sometimes, but it can be done. And if you struggle with that, this CD might be able to help you. Now, here's where Jacob made a big mistake. He planted two ideas in his sons' hearts. Number one, he made Joseph very prideful, singling him out as the favorite son. And you know what happened? Joseph developed an elevated sense of importance. Joseph started acting like the favorite son. He felt like the favorite son. He acted like the favorite son. And we're going to see that he began to lord it over his brothers. He flaunted it in front of his brothers. And then secondly, Jacob turned his sons against Joseph because they felt rejected. Wherever someone is accepted, the other person is rejected. Unless everybody's treated fairly and equally. And boy, we have to do the best we can with that. This family became a breeding ground for hatred and bitterness and jealousy. And I wonder how many families look like Jacob's family even today. I wonder how many families living under one roof. It's not the family they wish it was, but there's jealousy and bitterness and hatred, and people aren't getting along. And how hard that is. How difficult, and so far from God's plan for every single family. Well, maybe this series will be helpful if that seems to be a struggle that you have. One night, Joseph had a dream. That's okay. Anybody here dream? Few? Okay. Shadis will do it to you. I don't know if he had Shadis, but. So he had a dream, and the next day he gathered all his brothers together to tell them about his dream. Bad idea. He told them, he said, here's my dream. We were all out in the field, and we were bundling wheat, and my bundle stood up, and all the other bundles bowed down to it. What was he saying? He's saying, in this dream, brothers, you're all going to bow down to me one day. Well, notice in verse 8, his brothers said, do you really think you're going to be king and rule over this? Now, they hated Joseph even more than ever because of what he said about the dream. I mean, it's bad enough they hated him because he was the favorite. He got a fancy coat. His father made it known he was the favorite. But now he's saying, hey, you guys, I had a dream, and you're all going to bow down to me one day. Talk about adding insult to injury. See, now he's flaunting the fact that he's the favorite son. Joseph seems to be, his head seems to be inflating. He's getting like a big head. He's thinking more of himself than he really should. Did he sense his brothers hating him? Did he learn it wasn't a good idea to share dreams like that? That was a big mistake. To tell other people that they were going to bow down to him. That was a big mistake to share that dream. But did he learn from it? Guess what? Nah, he had another dream. And he got up the next day and told his brothers about the dream. And he said, the sun, the moon, and the stars all bowed down to him. And then he told his father the dream. And his father basically said, are you out of your mind? Do you think your mother and I are going to bow down to you? Now, he didn't learn from the first mistake. He came back the second time. and he did something very similar. He repeated the mistake. He told them about a dream which is very similar to the first one, made everybody feel bad, but made him feel good. Hey, there's a life lesson. Don't say things that make everybody feel bad, but make you feel good. Because they'll hate you for it. They will. Joseph lived life on a different plane than his brothers, even his fathers. He had a different attitude toward himself than everybody else did now. His experience of special treatment had become his expectation. See, when you're treated specially over and over and over, you know what happens? You begin to expect it. And now you have this attitude of entitlement. Hey, I expect this now. You know, a simple thing. I wonder if it's ever happened to you. Maybe someone has done something for you, and they did it again and again and again and again, and then you begin to expect it. And when they don't do it, you get angry. Hey, how come you're not doing that anymore? Because you created an attitude of expectation from that. You know, maybe somebody brings you a coffee. They come to work. Hey, I brought you a coffee. Oh, man, thank you. It was great. Next day they come. I got you a coffee. Oh, thank you. This goes on for a week. The next week, they don't bring you a coffee. Hey, where's my coffee? How come you didn't bring me a coffee? You mad at me? Did I say something? No. But you see, you begin to expect things. And when you don't get the things that you've entitled yourself to, then you start to think wrong thoughts. And that's where Joseph was. He had that attitude of entitlement. And when we get that, we question why, and then we think there's something wrong. Notice verse 11. Now, Joseph's brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept wondering about the dream. The brothers hated him more and more, but the father's thinking, they believe that God brought dreams. And maybe he does, I don't know. Probably does in some cases. So the father's thinking, and the father was right. And when we get to the end of the series, we're going to see how the dreams of Joseph, man, they were right on. They were right on. But the point is, something can be right on, but timing is everything. Timing is everything. What you're going to say has to be timed. It's got to be the right environment. It's got to be the right time. It's got to be the right circumstance. And obviously, that wasn't the right circumstance for Joseph. There are things that we can say, but if we say them, like, you don't want to discuss bills, household bills, on the way to church, or on the way to a wedding, or some event. You don't want to do that. Because you know what happens? You pull in the parking lot, and if you're not connecting with how money's being spent, it's like the temperatures are raising, anger is starting to mount, now there's friction, and then you walk into church. Hi, how you doing? Hallelujah! Great! God is good! You sing, you clap, you go outside. Where were we? Oh yeah, how could, and you can ruin a wedding that way? Anybody ever ruin a wedding? You don't have to raise your hand. Somehow this conversation breaks out that shouldn't, and you get to the wedding and it's like, oh, it's a lousy time. Should have been a fun time. So if there are serious things to discuss in your life, timing is everything. Make sure the time is right. Make sure the place is right. And you have enough time allotted to get through the whole conversation and finish it. Because the last thing you want is an unfinished, heated conversation, and then you're going into an event that should be a good time, because it won't be a good time. Okay? So Joseph's dreams, they did predict his future rise to greatness, but instead of keeping them to himself, which he should have, he flaunted them. He flaunted them. The wisdom of Solomon would fit here. Solomon said, let another praise you and not your own mouth. A stranger and not your own lips. See, the best praise comes from someone else. When you praise yourself, that's not like the best audience. When it comes from someone else, now it means something. I remember a few months ago I saw on the news the mayor of New York. He said, "I think we should have a parade in my honor." I'm like, what? He's going to have a parade. It would have been better if someone said, "Mayor, we decided we'd like to have a parade in your honor." But no one did. So he came up with his own. If no one's going to have a parade in my honor, then I think I'll get it going. And we'll have a parade in my honor. Maybe he should have read Solomon's wisdom. Let another praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips. Now, Joseph made 3 mistakes. Number 1, he lacked discernment. Oh, discernment, so important. Discernment is simply the ability to judge well. It's the ability to look at a situation, and here it comes, to know what to say the right thing. Lack of discernment is to say the wrong thing in a given situation. Okay? Proverbs 10 says, "On the lips of the discerning, wisdom is found, but a rod is for the back of him who lacks understanding." See, if you're not discerning when you speak, it's going to come back on you. And when you're discerning when you speak, when you ascertain the situation and say the right thing, you look really, really smart. But if you don't ascertain the situation and say something, you look really, really foolish. Discernment makes you look smart. You always want to be discerning. You want to work at being discerning. Joseph wasn't discerning. With that in mind, let me give you a contemporary example. Facebookers, people that are on Facebook, need to remember this. People post things on Facebook that are very foolish, and when I read some of them, I'm embarrassed for the person that posted it. And they say things, and I wonder if they realize the whole world is going to see this. Do you want the whole world? Sometimes I see 2 people with conflict, and the whole world is peeking in. That's like embarrassing. See, that's lack of discernment. You got to be very discerning on social media. Before you hit that send button, back up. Read it in the eyes of 1 million people. People that don't know you, people that do know you, but they don't know what's going on. And you might you might hit the delete button before you send it. Because there's a lot of foolish, crazy, and I would say embarrassing stuff that even Christians put there. I've seen Christians put dirty jokes on social media. I'm like, really? That's funny? How can that be funny? How can that be funny when you've got the Spirit of God inside of you? That's not funny. It's embarrassing. And now the whole world knows what a fool you are. And I'm not thinking of anybody in particular, so you're all safe. But you know what I'm saying? Be discerning. Whatever you put out there, be discerning, because what you say is going to produce an image in the minds of other people. And your words will shape in their mind the kind of person that you are, especially if they don't know you. They'll think they know you by the things that you say. I wish the ones that posted those things would be embarrassed about it. So discernment, look at the situation that you're in and act accordingly. And if you do fail, don't blame yourself. Don't get down on yourself. Learn from it, okay, and then go on. I should be the smartest person in the world because I've made so many mistakes. But I'm not. You know why? Because I've repeated a lot of them. But I'm thankful for Joseph. He's going to straighten me out. Number 2, Joseph lacked sensitivity. He didn't consider the impact of his words on others. He didn't. You know, sometimes people say they're just being honest, but truth must always be seasoned with salt. Was Joseph lying? No. He was telling the truth. That was his dream. He got it right. But it was hurtful the way he said it. It was hurtful to his brothers, to his father, to his mother. See, it's not about truth. If somebody says, well, I'm just telling the truth, I'm just being honest. It's not about being honest. It's about having your speech always seasoned with grace. That's what it's about. That's what Paul said. Let your speech be with grace as those seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. You know, the Bible says when Jesus came, he came full of grace and truth. It wasn't just truth. You know what truth does? Truth kills. Truth kills. The truth about you and the truth about me can kill us. But grace makes that truth attainable. You know, when we were little kids and we had to take an aspirin, anybody, and your parents, your mom would crush it up on a spoon. Anybody ever have that? And the aspirin was nasty, right? It was like, oh. So what did she do? I know what mine did. Put some jelly on it, right? The aspirin is the truth. The jelly is the grace. And when you put grace and truth together, you can take it. You can take it in. So you put the jelly on the spoon, the aspirin, you ate it. Oh, not bad. I can taste the jelly. Okay? So Joseph, he lacked that kind of sensitivity. And we have to be so careful that, yeah, you can say the truth, but man, it's going to be wrapped in grace. Because the truth kills. Paul said the law will kill you. He said, when the law came, I died. The law killed me. The law said guilty. The law said this is what you are. You're wretched, you're condemned, you're no good. But grace came along and said, you don't have to stay there. Grace came along and said, you are loved by God, and there's a sacrifice that's made on your behalf. Grace is everything. Joseph didn't have, at that time, that kind of grace. And then thirdly, he lacked maturity. He demonstrated that he wasn't yet ready for the promotion that God was going to give him. God was going to promote Joseph big time. Oh yeah, you might know the story and we'll see it at the end. He was going to receive a big promotion, bigger than anybody could ever imagine. But this day, he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. You'll never be promoted until you're ready to be promoted, at least in the spiritual realm. And in the natural realm, if people are promoted before they're ready, there's nothing but trouble. So God's working in the life of Joseph. He knows the plans that he has for him to bring him to an expected end. And he's going to work in him. But where he is right now, oh man, he's a work in progress. And he's far from ready. Now this series is about learning from your mistakes. That's what it's about. That we all make mistakes, and that's okay. See, here's what we need to understand. It's okay to make a mistake. It's not okay to make it over and over and over and over again. The mistake is a teaching tool. You learn from it. And you might make it another 1 or 2 times, but eventually you're going to I got to wake up to this thing. It hurts too much. I got to get this right. If you fail to learn, it's going to be a painful life. Life's going to hurt. And life's going to stink. And you're going to be like, oh man, I don't know. I don't like life anymore. Why? Because all the opportunities you had to better yourself, you didn't. And instead of getting better, you know what happens when you repeat mistakes? You get worse and worse and worse. And you feel bad. It's a catch-22. The more you feel bad about yourself, the worse you get. the least you try to help yourself, then you feel worse, and then it just keeps going. It's a vicious cycle. And you have to break out of that cycle and say, enough's enough. I'm tired of making this mistake over and over and over. I'm breaking free. And I'm going to start today. And I'm going to get it right. And where does the power come from to break that cycle? It comes from walking with God. The just shall walk by faith. You're not going to do it in the strength of your own flesh. It can't happen. We have to draw near to God. We have to be absorbed in His Word. We have to be empowered by the Holy Spirit. And that's when things will begin to change for the better. Because no one wants to keep repeating the same thing over and over. So Joseph had a lot to learn. A lot to learn. But the good news is he's going to learn. So we look at Joseph, right? And we think sometimes like, okay, there's probably a little Joseph in me. Right? Can anybody say that? There's maybe a little Joseph in you. But here's the good news. If Joseph can learn from his mistakes, so can we. So rejoice. If there's a little bit of Joseph in you, and maybe you lack sensitivity, or you lack discernment, or you lack maturity, that's okay. That's not to be condemned. Recognize it. Say, oh yeah, you know what? I'm not too discerning. I say the wrong thing in the wrong place. Or maybe I'm not too sensitive. And I say things that build me up, but they knock other people down. Or maybe I'm immature. Maybe I want to be farther along in life, but I'm way over here because I haven't grown enough to be where I want to be. If those things are true, that's okay. Because now we have a frame of reference, a reference point where we can start from. And we can begin, like Joseph, to move away. Well, we're going to see some things are going to happen to Joseph. Bad things. Really bad. So bad, he's even going to think that God gave up on him. And that's when he goes to school. And now he's going to begin to learn the life lessons to bring them from what he is to what God wants him to be. And we'll see that next time. Let's bow our heads.